On today's program, we talk about the largest group to use the Ball State facilities during the summer, more than 3,000 thespians from all over the world. Also, we visit the world of jazz. Doug Finney is director of the International Thespian Society Summer Festival, assisted by Ronald Longstreth, permanent director of the Cincinnati-based group. They talk with us about the program in the theater for the high school students. Ron, how does the International Thespian Society help aspiring actors?
We work through the secondary school theater teacher in training programs. We have a series of volunteers, state directors, trustees that work with the high school teachers, working in areas of curriculum development, new teaching techniques for the classroom. And really, rather than training aspiring actors, we train people for life, for love, and for happiness.
As executive director of the International Society, you're here to evaluate the festival.
That is correct. I served quite a few years as the festival chairperson and then as co-chair director, and now am evaluating the conference, and it's a much easier job.
Well, you have the tough one then, Doug, running the conference. And we have how many attending?
2,400.
2,400.
Right.
That's quite a few to keep track of. How do you do it?
Well, we have a wonderful staff. We have, even though I'm in charge, I think my job is easier than it used to be because we have wonderful people on our staff who all know their particular areas and handle them beautifully. And we also have, as Ron mentioned, volunteers in the field, and they come and they not only come here and have a good time, but they also assist us. Many of them take on responsibilities. So I guess my major job is supervising and seeing that everything is going okay. But it's easier than it used to be because we've got a handle on it, and we come back each year at Ball State, and they're very organized, and we feel we're organized. So it isn't as much work as it looks like. So.
Speaking of coming to Ball State, Ron, you've been coming here for some 10 seasons. Once you were what, biannually? Or?
It used to be a biennial festival, and we had 2,700 in attendance and felt that was just a little bit too much to handle. Emmons Auditorium, of course, could handle more than that, but dormitory, food-wise, why we were running into difficulty. And the mere fact of having 27,000 high school or 2,700 high school students was just a little bit excessive. So we switched to an annual festival. 82,
right.
And we dropped back to 1,300 in attendance, and it's been growing since that point to where we're now 2,400 again on an annual basis.
Do you take all who apply, or are there some that you turn back?
Thus far, we've taken everyone that has wanted to come in, but we have reached the point where next year we're going to have a cutoff between 2,500 and 2,600.
Doug, tell us about some of the things that the aspiring actors learn. You have all kinds of classes, makeup, drama, voice.
Oh, they learn a lot. We have many workshops taught by theater instructors from all over the country, and this goes on especially in the afternoon. And then we also have productions in the morning and the evening, and the schools get very involved. I think they learn a great deal, and they also participate a great deal. In other words, most of the schools are also on the program. They not only attend the workshops presented by guest artists, but they also participate, and then they bring a production, and they're very involved too. And I think the ones that really enjoy the conference the most are the ones that also are very actively involved on the program, have a play, and take a responsibility for the week and so forth. So,
how do you select the plays to be performed here at the festival?
Well, on the main stage, we select them primarily through the state conferences and from recommendations, and we try to screen them and view them because we want to represent quality educational theater and try to get, you know, the finest on our main stage. In the play marathon, which goes on in the afternoon in the University Theater, those are selected by the trustees as they travel around and see shows. And then in the experimental theater, schools who want to perform can automatically be invited to perform in the experimental theater.
So it's a selective process. Now,
right.
Why is it that the public can't attend the performances? I know this is always a problem you deal with.
Well, one of the main reasons is, first of all, we have a very large delegation of 2,400, and if we opened it to everyone, we would suddenly be, you know, without seats. And it's primarily for our delegates. The other big reason is that we get a royalty waiver from the play publishers. They let produce the play here on the main stage without paying a royalty. In return, they ask that only the delegates at the conference attend that performance, because if you open it to the public, then suddenly it's no longer just a festival performance. But it isn't that we want to turn anybody away, because we appreciate the fact that people in Muncie are very interested and want to come, and they actually can come if they're willing to pay a session price. We have like a fee of $10, which gets you into that particular session, and they can see the show.
So they become a part of the festival,
right,
per se.
Right, absolutely.
All right. As we talk with you here, the students are streaming into Emmons Auditorium for what production?
The Meet Nobody Knows this morning is the first presentation, and then we have Jerome Lawrence, playwright, as a guest speaker between the Meet Nobody Knows and our second performance of Antigone.
Now, are these performances evaluated?
We have seen the work of both of the directors this morning in times gone by. Gerald Ray Horn from Georgia, and the second director, Robin Bennett, is also from Georgia this morning. And we've seen both of them do several productions in the past, so they have been evaluated.
But will you evaluate them this morning? Couldn't the productions that you have seen and the one this morning differ a great deal?
That's quite true, and it's happened many times in the past, much to our chagrin.
How many productions are on main stage, say, in a day, like today?
There will be basically 2 each morning, and then 1 full-length presentation in the evening. So 3 a day. Occasionally we do a full-length in the morning as well as a full-length in the afternoon or evening, so there's only 2 a day, but we try to get 3 in a day.
Doug, how many students and those who attend the festival and belong to your society become actors, full-time actors?
If you were to answer that in the sense of life, they all do, because I think that's what they're being trained for. That's what they study, really, about life. I don't think a lot of them do, and I don't think that theater teachers feel that that's their primary goal, to teach them to be actors. I think that's why we all love theater so much and why we're involved in it, because it is a tool by which you can learn about life, and it is a tool in which you can really learn about how to handle life. And so certainly a percentage of them do, and we have a number of stars and famous people who were thespians or are thespians and became thespians in high school, and maybe that's 5%, and then maybe that's even high. But I think all of the kids here, they will at least always appreciate, hopefully be good audiences, maybe be in a community theater show sometime, maybe work backstage. But most importantly of all, we'll have learned a lot about how to be good human beings, because when you're in a play and you're involved in a play, you learn about other people, you learn about life. And I think that's why everyone who's in theater loves it and sees how important it is, because you learn so much about how to be a good person and handle your life later on.
I'm always impressed by the quality of people you bring as instructors. For example, makeup artist named Nye. Now, we all know of Ben Nye, the Hollywood makeup artist who is world famous and has worked on some of the greatest motion pictures. Is that his son that is here?
Correct, yes. And he's going to be here for 2 days doing a makeup workshop. And then another famous name in makeup, Bob Kelly, will be here on Friday and Saturday. So, I think they find out about our festival, and they find out the kind of quality that's going on here and the kind of seriousness that the kids have in learning about theater, and so they come. At one time it was very difficult for us to get not only famous people like Ben Nye and Dana Nye and Bob Kelly, but guest artists from all over the country, and now they seem to come to us. It's very easy to. We have like 40 guest artists from all over the country, colleges and universities and professional repertory companies, and it's not difficult getting them to come here at all. They enjoy it, and they see a great value in it, and so they kind of knock on our door.
What does the International Thespian Society do for the other 50 weeks?
We do a lot of record keeping of our affiliated schools. We have 2,500 affiliated schools from throughout the United States, 21 countries outside of the continental United States. We try to service their needs in working in areas such as curriculum development. We just recently published a tech theater course guide working with some other theater organizations. We have a scholarship program for students who are interested in going on and pursuing their theater or their communicative arts. We work with schools in securing waiver of royalties, attempt to work with our volunteers in publishing newsletters and keeping the schools aware of what's going on within their own state and throughout the United States, and providing as many theatrical opportunities as possible.
Ron's being modest too because he's very much involved in a program right now called Snowbird. It's going to go on in August, and it's a retreat just for the teachers. We're trying to work more with the teachers to help them with their programs, and he's running that in August. So he gets to relax this week, but in about, no, I'm kidding, but in about 2 months he's going to work very hard on this retreat out in Utah, and it's the first time.
Good. And this, do you have teachers here with the students?
We require an adult to be with all of our students. There's a few times when the theater sponsor cannot be with their own students, but they do work through our state directors and our trustees so that they are chaperoned during the week.
So it's more of a chaperone role rather than an instructive role for the teachers. And your Snowbird project is going to be an instructive role.
It's strictly for our teachers, and this is the first time that we have tried this, and I'm excited about it. We have over 60 teachers coming from throughout the United States, a teacher from Japan, a teacher from Canada, and the rest from the United States. We've brought in 7 professionals to work with the teachers in innovative classroom techniques. We have a person working in voice, a person working in body movement. We're also dealing with time and stress management because we experience a lot of teacher burnout, and we're trying to combat that too.
I can imagine there would be working with these live wires that we see on campus. You mentioned coming to Ball State, that this is the 10th year. What do you find attractive about Ball State and the city of Muncie?
Well, I was a Ball State graduate, so I was familiar with the campus. Of course, this is a new auditorium since the time that I graduated in '59. But Ball State has the theater facilities that we need, and they have the staff that is willing to work with our students. The people who are coming in and doing the main stage productions are always very, very complimentary of the Emmons Auditorium staff, the union personnel, and they're willing to assist the students in learning, and that's important. It's something you don't find at many universities. And also Ball State has the housing facilities, the dormitory, the meal situation that can accommodate the 2,700, and most universities don't have all 3 aspects: the theater, the housing, and the meal situation that can accommodate that number.
That's fine. They're always well behaved and most welcome every year. They come from great distances, do they not, Doug?
Yes. We have a troupe this year from Panama. We also, of course, last night we had a school from Hawaii that, pretty amazing, they had all these sets that they had shipped over, first by boat and then by land. And next year we're hoping to have a school from Australia and a school from Japan, and hopefully a return by a school from Canada.
Besides students coming from all the states, I mean, don't you have them from almost all of the United States?
Right. Oh, yes. In addition to those countries, we also have, I would say, probably 48 or 47 out of the 50 states. Most of the states are represented here.
Do you have any unusual challenges with a group this large? Emotional problems, anything like that?
We pray for nice, cool weather.
Yes, right. And we've had it so far.
We like to think of them as challenges rather than problems.
Right.
You look at it that way. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Larry McWilliams, director of the Ball State University Jazz Ensemble and a nationally recognized jazz musician in his own right, gives us an inside look at his world of jazz. Larry, it's been said that summer is for jazz.
Right.
That's true. What can we expect from the Ball State Jazz Ensemble this summer?
Well, as usual, we have a lot of jazz happening around here in the summertime, and we've had a couple of nice concerts already. One on campus with the Summer Jazz Band, and one in Anderson at the park for the Anderson City, and which was, both of them were very well attended and very, very nice. And we got a big jazz camp coming up on, I think it's July 13, the week of July 13.
For how long, a week?
It's a week, yeah, and it's our Mid-America Jazz Camp.
Is this something we have every year?
Right. We have probably 25 or 30 kids coming in from all around the state, a few from out of state. And I have several people helping me with that. Frank Pizzullo of the faculty is going to help. He's a pianist. He'll be working with the improv and jazz combos. And then, as every year I bring in one of the outstanding high school jazz band directors from the state. And I've had Barry Ashton from Fort Wayne. I've had Ed King from Fort Wayne. I've had Bill Pritchett from Muncie Central. And this year we're going to have Bob Seimer from Portage High School.
What do they contribute?
Well, they work with me, with the bands, and they deal with some of the problems that maybe I'm not too familiar with, since I don't work with high school kids that often. And they help me oversee and run the jazz camp in general.
Can't imagine there'd be a problem related to jazz that you wouldn't be able to help solve, even though it related to a high school student.
I don't think it's the problem with jazz as it is as much as that maybe I'm not too familiar with some of the kids' reactions to some of the jazz materials that I work with, and some of the historical facts or names and so forth. I'm not too familiar with maybe what they know today in jazz. However, I do adjudicate high school jazz bands a lot, and I'm constantly out soloing with jazz bands. But on a day-to-day basis, I don't work with younger kids that often. So,
how do they relate to the greats? You know, and we're losing so many of them. Most recently, Benny Goodman. And how do they relate to the real originators of jazz?
Well, see, this is really the nitty-gritty, I think, of our jazz camp and of our bringing in some of the state's better teachers from the outside, because we try to pass this kind of information along. And I'm not too familiar with what kids are getting today out there as far as historical facts, like do they really know about Benny Goodman and what Benny Goodman did. Benny Goodman was the king of swing. He truly started the big band craze. And I'm not sure kids really know that. They know that Benny Goodman was a clarinet player, and maybe he was a swing clarinet or Dixieland clarinet player and so forth. I'm not too sure that so many people today know that Benny Goodman had one of the finest jazz bands, or at that time it was dance band. So, you know, he was a very influential force in the jazz band movement.
They can hear his technique.
Right.
The music of years ago. How do they relate to that?
Well, I don't know. Everyone relates to technique, I think. It's like the old syndrome of the fast gun of the West. There's always one floating around wanting to see if he can outdraw someone else, or, you know, see who's the fastest. And people can relate to that. When you hear Benny Goodman play, and especially, well, I started to say some of his older recordings, but however, he was quite a player up until his death. And but you can sense that he's quite a technician. I'm not so sure that they know what kind of personality and what a dominant force Benny Goodman was. Now, I never worked with him. I've worked with a lot of people of that caliber, but I never was around him. But I always heard he was a very strong personality, and he demanded the best out of his bands. And when you worked for him, you really worked.
True dedicated musician. I was surprised at one of the comments that he was a very difficult man to know. I think Steve Allen said that.
Yeah. Well, I don't think he was a man of many words. He was a man of action, and he was very concise, you know, to the point about his idiom and about what he wanted to do. And evidently this is very, very true, because, I mean, let's face it, people were going crazy over the Benny Goodman band just as they did over Elvis Presley, or just as they did over the Beatles. You know, it was just a crazy syndrome. And the kids when they see that today, I think they have difficulty believing that. They were dancing in the aisles and screaming and crying, and, you know, pulling at them, and it was amazing to see that around a dance band. You know,
Each generation has its own, doesn't it?
sometimes I think I'm in the wrong era.
Well, you've played with, as you mentioned, several of the top bands and considered an outstanding jazz performer in your own right. And with the recent death of Benny Goodman and the others that we've mentioned, how do you view the current crop of musicians to fill their shoes? You mentioned those wanting to be top guns, but do they have the depth and the ability?
Well, you know, in a way, I think it's a completely different world now in the music business. It really is. It's totally different. I know there are some strains of holdover, but for instance, now, I was on both the Dorsey bands, the Jimmy Dorsey band and the Tommy Dorsey band. And I think and this was in the late 60s, right before I came to Ball State, really. And I think probably the entire band was under 30 years old on the Tommy Dorsey band. Well, we played everywhere, you know, New York to California, and no one ever said, gee, that's a good band for a bunch of 20-year-olds, you know. And my point being, I think that colleges, and such as right here at Ball State University, we are really doing our best to turn out kids that can go out and play in the Glenn Miller band, or play in the Tommy Dorsey band, the Buddy Rich band. If there was a Benny Goodman orchestra, someone could go play in that. For instance, as I just said, I played with the Nelson Riddle Orchestra just last Saturday, and you get a call on something like that, and you go in and you play. You're playing a style, and you do whatever is said and whatever is outlined for you to do, and you play. But I have that kind of training. I think I'm very adaptable. I can play Dixieland style, swing style. I can play, as we say, modern jazz or cool jazz. I can play within the rock style of playing, and we teach this, and at least I know I do, and because that's what being a total musician is all about, a complete musician, especially in the commercial jazz idiom.
That was an interesting assignment. You mentioned it was a private party at the Melvin Simon Estate,
Right.
By the Nelson Riddle Orchestra.
Right.
Now, does Riddle come in with apparently not a full orchestra if he contacts you and other musicians?
Right. A lot of people were from around this area, and a certain person is a contractor for that, and they in turn get several key players in the area and so forth. And it's done quite frequently. This is very
common. Was
very common,
Riddle
yes.
himself there?
Well. Of course, now Nelson died here just, I believe, within the last year, but his son is fronting the band now, Chris Riddle.
Do they become as successful, the Glenn Miller Orchestra and?
Well, the Glenn Miller Orchestra is still doing quite well, and so is the Dorsey bands. However, I believe they have both been purchased by someone, the name, everything, lock, stock, and barrel, and it's being run by someone else, and it's a complete business, organized. And
when you engage the Nelson Riddle Orchestra, even though his son conducts and so forth, you're buying a sound.
Yes, you are. Right.
Dorsey's different than Riddle and
That's right.
so forth.
You're buying a definite sound. That's why and how they became who they were and the importance of it. You know, Nelson Riddle did all of Frank Sinatra's work for years, did all of his arranging, and Billy May did a lot of the work after Nelson Riddle. And yeah, you're buying a definite sound. And like Henry Mancini. Henry Mancini is very, very popular still today. As a matter of fact, a good friend of mine, Jack Guilfoyle, the drummer, and guitarist Royce Campbell are from Indianapolis, and they worked with Henry Mancini doing these concert dates all over the world. And they will go and play with an orchestra. As a matter of fact, they were with the Cincinnati Symphony just recently, and the Pittsburgh Symphony, and that's the way the business is run now.
You're contacted frequently. I understand you've been contacted for a tour this summer with a leading artist.
Yes, there's some work right now being prepared for a Pia Zadora tour, and all of the details aren't worked out yet. time and so forth. But I look forward to doing that.
She's what you'd call in the business hot. She has a current
That's
hit
right,
record.
right. She's very hot right now, very exciting, and no end to what she may accomplish.
Sounds like a fun tour. Now, how were you contacted, and how were they aware of your availability?
There's a person that I work with is Al Cobine, and Al Cobine is a very, very fine musician, has his own orchestra, and lives here in Indiana, Bloomington as a matter of fact, and comes from a musical past of from Richmond, I believe, and he does a lot of contract work and things like that.
I notice with groups that come to Emmons Auditorium, frequently the orchestra is put together with local talent, many
Right.
times from Ball State and Indianapolis and
Right.
surrounding communities. In the old days, they used to travel with an orchestra. Is that true?
Yes, the times, there again, the economical times are so much different than they were many, many years ago. And it has become much cheaper now for someone to, like for instance, I contracted the Bob Hope show here at Emmons, and the Jerry Lewis show, the Red Skelton show, and I put the orchestra for all of those together. And it's just so much, it's so much cheaper in the long run rather than containing a 40 or 50 piece orchestra traveling around the world when, as you said earlier, that we've got people trained so well now all over that you can really find fine musicians and you can assemble them and put them together.
They bring their own music arranger and
Yes,
conductor.
they'll usually bring their own conductor, their own music, and once in a while a few key instruments. Sometimes they bring a pianist. Usually that's a conductor and pianist. Sometimes they'll bring a drummer, and sometimes they will bring maybe a lead trumpet player.
Are any of the names you mentioned difficult to work for?
Yes,
Very demanding.
yes,
Fairly or unfairly?
yes.
Yes. Let's get on to another question. I know you don't like to talk about the people you work for, but we're always interested in knowing the personalities of
Well,
the...
some of them are wonderful, and some of them are not so wonderful. I remember I was with Hello Dolly before I came to Ball State with Carol Channing, and she was a wonderful lady.
She appears to be.
Crazy and zany, and but was always very, happy that you were there. She was glad you were part of her orchestra. And then I worked with Cabaret some before I came with Liza Minnelli, and it was different.
Yeah.
It was a lot different.
Yeah, I'd be very disappointed if the other one was not as friendly as she appears
Yeah.
and outgoing. Let's talk about your trip very briefly to Montreux, Switzerland last summer. You were there about this time.
Right.
Has anything developed from the performance for the group or the university?
Well, I don't know. I think that I could tell from around the state, from other teachers and students, we really gained a great deal of prestige, I believe, from our activity. And of course, we had a lot of concert dates off campus last year. People asked us to come to their school, and when we did, I would show some of our film that Joe Pacino made for us while we were over there.
He's from Ball State's Media
Right,
Service.
he's from Ball State, yeah. And so I would show the film, and I would also show Winola Richards of Dean Urice's office put together a big billboard of pictures, still pictures that we had taken all over, to and fro. And I put those up on easels, and it was very interesting. People came by and asked questions, and of course the idea was for kids to say, gee, I wanted to be a part of that, are you going to do it again? And I'm saying, yes, we're going to do it again, and we are going to do it again. So by all means.